Alabama, let's get it.
The process, no one can stop this. Hottest show in the streets, I bet you can't top this. Rammer, jammer, yellow hammer, come see how we rock this. Alabama fans, the best, there's no way you can top this. Recruiting news and interviews, just sit back and watch this.
Recruiting news and interviews, just sit back and watch this.
The process.
Welcome back into The Process, Crimson Tide Recruiting. I am your host, Justin Smith, the scouting and recruiting analyst for Touchdown Alabama magazine. While you are here, be sure to hit that subscribe button below. Also, be sure to leave a like whether you are subscribed or not. I will be here every Tuesday and Thursday evening to break down the latest in Tide football recruiting news on The Process on Touchdown Alabama's YouTube page. Today, I want to talk about the future of the Tide's recruiting efforts in the 2022 recruiting class, specifically inside the state. The Tide currently has 5 signatures from prospects inside the state of Alabama in the 2021 recruiting class. So today, I want to talk about what the future in-state recruiting class could look like for the Crimson Tide in the 2022 recruiting class. I will highlight each recruit from the state of Alabama who has an offer from the Tide. Also talk about a couple of 2022 prospects who could receive an offer from the Tide a little bit later down the road, and also discuss a underrated prospect in the 2022 recruiting class who a lot of schools need to know about. So I will dive into him as well. So thank you guys so much for joining me. As I said, before I dive into the future of the Tide's 2022 recruiting class, I want to hit you guys with a couple of recruiting updates. So with that being said, let's get the process started. I am now going to dive into a couple of quick recruiting updates. The first update surrounds the Tides. 4 of the Tides in-state signees in Quincy McKinstry, Ian Jackson, Deontay Lawson, and Inquint and Barnes. All 4 of those guys were named to the Alabama Sports Writer Association's finalist list for the lineman or back of the year in their respective classifications. So a huge congratulations goes out to those Tide signees. Speaking of the Tide's 2021 recruiting class, I had an opportunity to catch up with 4-star defensive end KNU Cougs head coach in Lenny Jankowski. He told me that Coot is a kid who is a freak of nature who can do a lot of different things with his versatility and his ability to play multiple positions. Actually, be sure to check out my article, my interview with Jankowski over at touchdowналabama.com. Also, be sure to check out our continuing video breakdown series of the Tide's 2021 signees. You guys can check that out on our YouTube page as well as on our website over at touchdowналabama.com. Another quick recruiting update I want to provide you guys surrounds the Tide's 2021 4-star defensive back target Terrion Arnold, one of the Tide's top remaining targets. He assured me in a quick conversation that I had with him actually on today that the Tide was still very heavily involved in this recruitment. They are still pushing for him very hard despite them having a loaded 2021 recruiting class. But those were the couple of quick recruiting updates I wanted to provide you guys with today. Now we're going to dive into those 2022 prospects. Well, let's take a look at the Tide's top in-state targets in the 2021 recruiting class. When you look at the 2022 class inside the state of Alabama, it is pretty loaded. The state is loaded once again from top to bottom, and the Tide has tapped into that talent already, pulling in a verbal commitment from one of the top linebackers in Robert Woodyard. The Tide currently has one verbal commitment in the 2022 recruiting class, and that commitment is from Robert Woodyard. But we are going to start this discussion in this breakdown with the Tide's former linebacker commit in Jeremiah Alexander, a 5-star linebacker out of Thompson High School in Alabaster, Alabama, at 6'2" and 235 pounds. He has the size of an inside linebacker at the D1 football level at the moment. He actually put on some weight in between his junior and senior season. He played linebacker, inside linebacker for the most part throughout his junior season for the first time in his career because he was mostly used as a outside linebacker and as a edge rusher during his sophomore and freshman season for Thompson High School. But he has continued to mature and continue to develop when I had the opportunity to see him before Thompson started the season at one of their off-season practices, he looked like a totally different player physically. You could tell that he had continued to hit the weight room during the off-season, but he is a kid who really brings the thump when he makes tackles. He's a guy who is constantly looking to force turnovers. I really like that about Alexander. He's also a very knowledgeable linebacker. He controlled that Thompson defense. When you look at the Warriors defense, in my mind, in my opinion, I think they were one of the best high school defenses in the country, and he controlled that defense from the inside linebacker position, moving seamlessly back and forth between inside linebacker and outside linebacker constantly during the season. So the Tide is still recruiting him. He is expected to release a top 6 on tomorrow. I expect the Tide to be included in that top 6. So Jeremiah Alexander, a critical and I think a priority target for the Tide in the 2022 recruiting class. The next guy up is 5-star running back Emmanuel Henderson out of Geneva County High School in Hartford, Alabama. Looking at Henderson, he is a lengthy running back at 6'1" and 185 pounds. He has a small frame at the moment, so he definitely needs to add on some weight. But when it comes to his ability on the field, this is a kid who is more of a one-cut back. He makes that one cut and he explodes into the open field. He has great speed, and I think that is his biggest strength at the moment, his speed and his elusiveness in the open field. He plays at a smaller classification inside the state of Alabama, with them playing in the 2A classification, which is one of the smaller classifications. As I said, he constantly dominates at that level. I had an opportunity to see him in action. I think he scored 5 touchdowns in that game when I saw him play against Arrington High School at Geneva County during the season. But I was really impressed with some of the things he brought to the table. You could tell that he had great vision. You could tell that he had a high IQ because he did have to play a lot of different positions for Geneva County on that night, because he plays at quarterback at times. He lines up at wide receiver. He lines up at running back as well. So he brings a lot to the table. I do think he needs to develop a little bit more when it comes to adding on weight and adding on muscle, but I'm pretty sure he is aware of that. This is a national recruit, a recruit who schools across the country are continuing to go after, including some of the top programs in the country, looking at Clemson, also looking at Auburn, who could be a huge player in this recruitment, as he has said and has admitted that they are his dream school. So when you look at Alabama and Auburn, I think they are going to try their best to keep him inside the state. When I had an opportunity to interview him, when I got a chance to see him play, he told me that he loved the Tide's coaching staff. He has constantly told me that in interviews he has a great relationship with that coaching staff, including their safety coach and one of his main recruiters in Charles Kelly. So Emmanuel Henderson, another great prospect to keep your eyes on. Now we are going to go to Curtis Perry, a 4-star defensive lineman out of Park Crossing High School in Montgomery, Alabama. Looking at Perry, I think he is one of the more aggressive players in this class. Sometimes he could be a little bit too aggressive, because when I saw him play earlier in the season, he actually got a couple of flags because he made a couple of late hits. It roughed the quarterback up after the quarterback no longer had the ball. So he could be a bit too aggressive at times, so he needs to control that a little bit more. But he's a kid who brings a lot of physicality to the table, really aggressive and really athletic, possibly the most athletic defensive lineman in this 2022 recruiting class, because he plays a little bit of running back for Park Crossing High School inside the red zone. They like to give him the football and let him work. You do not see that from defensive tackles a lot, especially when you see them actually getting the ball. You see them possibly blocking in the red zone, but he gets the football and runs it in the end zone. So he is a gifted athlete in the 2022 recruiting class, and it's no secret why so many schools across the country are continuing to push for him, including Ohio State, a big-time program trying to pull in one of the top players from the state of Alabama. Auburn is still in the mix along with the Tide. When I interviewed Perry, he said that he was in constant contact with multiple Alabama coaches. I expect the Tide to continue to push for him. They are in a great position, arguably the leader for one of the most athletic defensive linemen in the 2022 recruiting class. The Alabama commit is the next prospect we want to talk about, and Robert Wigart, 4-star linebacker out of Williamson High School in Mobile, Alabama. Looking at Wigart, he's another one of those defensive prospects who plays all over the field at the high school football level. He played inside linebacker for Williamson High School for the most part during his junior season, but he also played wide receiver when he had the opportunity to catch up with his head coach, the former coach now of Williamson High School, and Derek Sumter. He told me that Woodyard showed a lot of growth as a leader during the junior season, but he also showed an ability to control a game by himself because he spent a lot of time at wide receiver as well, and he was really productive for Williamson High School, contributing on both sides of the football. I really like the athleticism and the comfortableness he shows in pass coverage at that inside linebacker position. And I think he pulls from his comfortableness as a wide receiver, and that really shows in coverage. I really like his coverage skills and just his all-around athleticism. He is also a kid who is an effective tackler, was able to pull down multiple tackles during his junior season, had more than 100 tackles on the season. So Robert Williams brings a lot to the table. The Tide currently have his verbal commitment. I don't see him going anywhere anytime soon. I think he's pretty locked in with the Crimson Tide. Will most likely be the leader of their 2022 recruiting class. Tristan Figgins is the next prospect we will talk about. He is a 4-star defensive back out of Oxford High School in Oxford, Alabama. He brings a lot to the table from a coverage standpoint. I think that his biggest strength is his coverage skills. He's a kid who can high point the football, an all-around athlete who actually took all of the interceptions he caught during his sophomore season back for touchdowns, and that displays and that brings to the forefront how athletic he is. He spends time on both sides of the football for Oxford High School, but plays defensive back for the most part. I think he needs to continue to get more aggressive. I think that will help his game out a lot if he can help more in run support. Show that he can play press coverage a lot more. He's more of a guy who can attack the football at his highest point when it's a pass down the field. If it's a short pass, the guy may catch it because he's not a kid who plays press coverage. He's not a guy who tends to be very aggressive, so I think he needs to improve on that. But his elite ball skills and his athleticism has several D1 coaches all over him, including the Tides coaching staff. They are included in his top 10 at the moment. I think they are in a great position, and they are going to continue to be in a great position for Figgins. And speaking of his coverage skills, I know a lot of high school coaches and coaches in general a lot of times do not like to see some of their players play 7-on-7, but I've had an opportunity to see Tristan Figgins play 7-on-7 for the last couple of seasons. He actually played with current Tide starting defensive back Malachi Moore with Southern Express on the 7-on-7 circuit, and I think those coverage skills that he has been able to work on during the 7-on-7 circuit, I think that has come to the forefront for Figgins. So he is another defensive back prospect for Tide fans to pay attention to when it comes to the Tide continuing to recruit inside the state. Now we're going to look at Hugh James, the 4-star athlete out of Faith Academy in Mobile, Alabama. Upon receiving an offer from the Tide, he told me that he felt Alabama was the best dynasty ever in history. So he has a lot of respect for what Nick Saban has built at Alabama and their continued success over forever when you talk about the University of Alabama and football in general. But looking at James, he currently stands at 6'3" and weighs 200 pounds. He's a rangy, athletic kid, and when you see him play wide receiver for Faith Academy, you almost think he should get a couple of looks at wide receiver because he can go up and get the football, shows great moves in the open field at 6'3" and 200 pounds. So I think he may need to get a couple of looks at wide receiver or possibly tight end. But the Tide seems to like him at linebacker, and I think his athleticism will fit in really well at that position along with his frame and his size. I think he could fill out his size a lot more with him being 6'3" and 200 pounds. But I think one of his biggest strengths as a linebacker is his ability to get into the backfield, rushing from the edge at times, but also just blitzing from the inside linebacker position. He is hard to contain because he has a lot of speed when blitzing. So I think the Tide are going to continue to push for him. I think Auburn is another school that's going to continue to be in the mix. But when we're talking about Auburn and all of these prospects, it is important to note that they do have a new head coach, and it's going to be pretty interesting to see how that impacts the Auburn Tigers recruiting efforts for guys like James. Tanner Bailey is the lone in-state quarterback who has an offer from the Crimson Tide, and Bailey was really productive during his junior season for Gordo High School. He actually threw more than 28 touchdowns despite missing a couple of games with a shoulder injury. But looking at Bailey, I think his biggest strength is his ability to thread the needle when he is in the zone. This is a guy who looks like one of the best quarterbacks in the country with his ability to fit the football in tight spaces. I think the biggest knock on his game at the moment is that he is a bit inconsistent at times. Once he gets into the zone, he definitely looks like one of the top quarterbacks in the country. I think he will continue to grow, continue to work on being more consistent, but I think the Tides coaching staff really seems to like him, especially the Tides offensive coordinator, Steve Sarkisian. So Bailey is a great prospect. Another quarterback Tide fans should definitely pay attention to, along with the other quarterbacks, a long list of quarterbacks the Tide is going after in the 2022 recruiting class. Alabama is continuing to go after her Trustville players, as 4-star athlete Amari Kelly has an offer from the Tide. We look at Kelly. He played a lot of wide receiver for Hood Trustville during his junior campaign, but he has an opportunity to play on both sides of the football at the next level. He played some defensive back for Hood Trustville, which is something you do not see a lot at the 7A in the 7A classification when you look at football inside the state of Alabama. But looking at Kelly, I think his biggest strength to me is his ability to catch the football in traffic. I think he has great route running ability as well, but I think he could be a great defensive back with his size and also with the aggressiveness that he plays with. He has great ball skills. He is able to catch interceptions with great efficiency, as I saw him play a couple of times during his junior campaign when he took on Quincy McKinstry in Penson Valley, and also when they took on Vestavia Hills later in the season. And he looked really good as a wide receiver, but I think he could be a guy who could play defensive back as well. He currently has a top school list. Alabama is included. I am interested to see how his recruitment plays out over the next couple of months or so. Another Hood Trustville player who has an offer from the Tide is Justice Finkley, a 4-star defensive lineman. When we look at Finkley before the game even starts, if you just see him walking onto the field, the way he is built, he's built like a tank. And if you saw him walking on the field, he would make you say, who is that kid? What position does he play? How many offers does he have? He looks like a D1 college football prospect. Once you see him, he's so physically developed. So he is a tank at the defensive tackle position, which is where he plays a lot. Along with playing defensive end, he is going to be an interior defensive lineman at the next level in terms of playing defensive end, not playing as an outside linebacker or an edge rusher. He's going to be more of an interior defensive lineman at the next level, in my opinion. But he has a lot of strength, can really fill up the run lines at times. I think he has a burst, a quickness to him. I think that is one of the things that really jumps out to me about Finkley is the quickness and that burst that he shows at times. It looks as if he jumps into the backfield and he wreaks havoc when he has that opportunity. So the Tide is one of the top teams in his recruitment. He told me that he was in contact with multiple members of their coaching staff. When you look at guys like Hallman, Wiggins, the Tide's wide receiver coach, also looking at Carl Scott, Alabama's defensive back coach. So he is in contact with some current Tide coaches. But I think his recruitment is a bit interesting because he grew up actually a Colorado Buffalo fan because his dad was a lifelong Colorado fan. He is also showing a lot of interest in the Florida Gators at this point in his recruitment. Looking at Florida, they have actually pulled in a couple of prospects from the state of Alabama over the last couple of recruiting cycles. Looking at the 2021 recruiting class, they have had an opportunity to pull in 4-star outside linebacker and defensive end Jeremiah Williams. So I'm pretty sure they are going to continue to push for Justice Finkley, a big time prospect in my mind in the 2022 recruiting class, who has an offer from the Tide. The last prospect we will take a look at today is TJ Dudley, the 4-star linebacker out of Montgomery Catholic in Montgomery, Alabama. He is one of the more versatile linebackers in the 2022 recruiting class because he plays inside linebacker, rushes from the edge at times, and he also drops back to safety in third and long situations for Montgomery Catholic. So you could tell that he is really comfortable in coverage. I think that is his biggest skill set, his strongest skill set is his ability to play in pass coverage as an inside linebacker. He really looks up to former Alabama linebacker Mack Wilson, and their games are similar in a couple of ways. I think Mack Wilson was very strong in pass coverage, and I think TJ Dudley shows that skill set as well. He currently has a top 6, which includes the Tide, along with some more heavy hitters when you look at LSU and Clemson. So he definitely has a loaded top 6. I think Auburn is in there as well. So TJ Dudley is a kid. Alabama is in a good position with the state of Alabama. Once again, has a good amount of linebackers in the 2022 recruiting class, and TJ Dudley is one of those prospects. We have taken a look at all of the prospects inside the state of Alabama in the 2022 recruiting class who have offers from the Tide. Now we are going to look at a couple of prospects who could be receiving a call from the Crimson Tide in the future, starting with Riley Quick, who is actually the younger brother of the Tide's offensive lineman Pierce Quick. He has a bit of a smaller frame than his brother Pierce. He currently stands at 6'5". They have a similar height, but his frame is a lot smaller because he currently weighs about 250 pounds. He plays offensive lineman for here at Trussville High School, but if he wants to play offensive lineman at the next level, he's definitely going to add on some weight. But he does have SEC offers. I think he's going to be a defensive end or a defensive lineman at the next level with that current frame that he has. But he is also an accomplished pitcher. This is a kid who is going to play baseball at the next level. He is a very successful baseball player, so he has an opportunity to play both sports at whatever school he chooses. So it'll be interesting to see if the Crimson Tide will put an offer on the table for this elite baseball and football prospect. Another prospect to watch out for is another younger brother of a Tide player, and that is Caden Story, the younger brother of the Tide's freshman defensive back, Christian Story. When you look at Story, he currently stands at 6'5" and weighs 240, around 250 pounds, and he is a defensive end, an athletic defensive end who has some Power 5 offers already. He actually played some quarterback a little bit during his junior campaign for Lynette High School. He is very athletic, and athleticism runs in his family. When you look at Christian's story and how productive he was as a high school football player inside the state of Alabama, one of the most productive players in the history of Alabama high school football. So Caden Story is another prospect to watch out for. Another quarterback I would take a look at is Connor Harrell out of Thompson High School. He has a nice touch on his passes. He can throw the ball all over the field. He has a couple of Power 5 offers. I know he has an offer from Tennessee. I think he really turned a lot of heads during his junior season for Thompson High School. I would take a look at Connor Harrell as well. But the most underrated prospect in the country that I also want to shine a light on is a guy who I actually wrote a story on a couple of days ago, and that is Ryan Peppins out of Thompson High School in Alabaster, Alabama. He currently stands at 5'7" and weighs 5'7" and weighs 165 pounds at the moment. And when I tell you his height and his weight, you may say that is really a small football player, but he plays a lot bigger than that. One of the most explosive players I have ever seen on tape. He currently does not have a Power 5 offer at the moment, but I think they are going to start rolling in because this is an explosive athlete, a kid who is very elusive in the open field, and he can make big time plays. He plays a lot bigger than what he really is. This is a kid who could really blow up possibly on the recruiting trail over the next couple of months. So Ryan Pepins is a guy to pay attention to.
Process.